Welcome to our podcast, Parenting by the Pint. Enjoy the show.
Greetings, Minivan Mafia. Lauren and I are longtime friends from Chicagoland that love getting together to chat about life, kids, family, and beer.
Each week we'll feature a brewery and sample at least 2 of their beers.
We'll also discuss a variety of topics ranging from parenting, pop culture, travel, marriage, and just about anything else that comes to mind. Welcome back, everybody, once again.
Hi.
Hey, so we've been gone from Chicago breweries for a while, and we're not going back quite yet.
Not yet, no.
I would guess it's because there's just an unlimited number of breweries all over the world, and we're going to jump around.
And we like to travel.
We like to travel.
We wind up picking up stuff in our travels.
And sometimes people bring us beer presents,
also
which we strongly encourage you to do.
Strongly encourage, yes.
So, in light of the enjoyment for travel, we're going to drink Mobcraft, which is from Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Yes.
And we're going to start out with a beer called a Hopolyps.
Yes, I've
which
screwed
I
this
said
up.
correctly
You did.
On the first recorded try.
I'm very proud of you. Yes, it's got a scene with the dinosaurs dying off of a meteor shower.
That is bleak.
Which is kind of love the graphic on here, but yes, I have not had either of these beers.
Okay.
So I want to throw that out there. I have been following Mobcraft for a bit, but
okay.
I have grabbed a handful when I see them here. They do distro to the Chicagoland area now, but I keep wanting to check out their space in Milwaukee and have yet to do that, so it's on our list.
Well, I just got a whiff of this beer when I poured it, and it smells really good.
It's a hazy IPA.
So I would encourage you to visit if it tastes as good as it smells.
All right, let's do it. That's a good.
It's pretty good.
It's a pretty good IPA.
Yeah. It's a little smoother. It doesn't quite have as much of like a citrusy kick as some do.
Yeah.
But that's never necessarily a bad thing. I mean, like, I like on the side of citrusy, but this is really smooth, good, creamy level.
It's even, like, the carbonation to it is kind of a nice balanced one. Like, it's not overly bubbly, but it's not flat. And I think that lack of citrus actually makes you pay more attention to the texture of it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I like it. It's a nice balanced hazy IPA.
It is.
This is good.
Yeah, I like it. Let me see the can real quick.
Of course.
So, this is one of their flagships, but they brew it seasonally.
Okay.
So you can't get it necessarily all the time, but you will be able to get it regularly.
Like every year or whenever.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they do it a couple times a year, but they do. They do it regularly, and I'm assuming they will continue to do it. So let me talk a little about Mobcraft, which is a super interesting brewery concept, I think, which is kind of what made me interested in them years ago. So they actually started in Madison in 2013. They are a crowd-sourced brewery.
Okay.
So they didn't start with Kickstarter. They actually started with a crowdfunding through something called Craft Fund.
Okay.
So what effectively they did was they wound up getting 50-something co-owners, all investing about $75,000 to get the company started.
Wow.
So they started in Madison in 2013. They wound up moving to Milwaukee in 2016. They actually just opened a location in Denver this year.
Oh,
They have 2 more locations slotted to open by next year. One is in Woodstock, Illinois.
Oh.
One is in Waterford, Wisconsin, and they hope to open a handful more in the next 3 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So super interesting concept. So when I say that this Hopolyps, is a flagship but seasonal. It started with an idea submitted by, and it says this on the can, Nick Rasmussen. So how their brewery first started was you submit an idea, whether it's as simple as I want a stout that tastes like Almond Joy, or it's a here's the recipe for the beer I want you to brew.
Okay.
And they crowdfund it by putting them on their website up for a vote.
Okay.
And people can vote for whatever beer, and essentially each of those votes is a pre-order. If that beer gets selected and gets brewed, you've automatically bought a 4-pack of it.
Oh.
If it doesn't, you don't pay anything. But, so they still do this. They have a bunch of flagship ones, but they also have ones that a handful of times throughout the year are up on their socials, and people vote for them. And then whatever gets the most votes gets produced.
Wow.
And so the person who submits it then gets a VIP brew day to come and like watch it get brewed. And then you also get like a winner's party, and you get free pours for the life of your beer at the brewery.
Wow. That's so cool.
Yeah. So you can submit ideas even now. You can go on their website and you can submit an idea, and eventually they'll probably have some sort of vetting that they put the top 4 or something like that up. But I've definitely voted for beers before.
Wow.
And they've been doing this for years. It actually was on Shark Tank in 2016. No one voted for it. No one invested in it.
Aww.
So they kept going on their own, and they've expanded and clearly done well enough.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were on Shark Tank, and pretty much everybody was like, I don't like beer, I'm not going to do this. And Mark Cuban was like, I drink Bud Light. And so...
Oh my goodness, that is so depressing.
There was nobody at the time that was interested in investing in a craft beer idea, which was very unique, and it still is, because I don't know of any other breweries that actually crowdsource their beer recipes at this point.
Right.
But it's very cool, the fact that you can submit an idea that you think is unique and would be a good flavoring, and you might get your beer brewed. Like,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool. So, so I was excited too that they're expanding to Illinois. Up in that area, we can go to Woodstock. We can stop at Huntley. Like, they're all close to each other. And
would work. I can do that.
An afternoon of brewery visits. But yeah, and I've had a handful of beers, neither of these, and they've all been pretty good. Like, some of them are very unique. They've had some unique combinations. You can go on their website to see some of the winning ones over the last few years that have been picked, and see kind of what their flavor combinations are. And then you can also see ones that they've decided they're going to continue producing. So the Hopolyps was originally a crowdsourced idea that must have done well enough that they decided to put it into a regular rotation.
I like that.
Yeah, I think it's just a really cool concept.
Yeah,
so
it is.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. I had no idea that was how they were set up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I saw it a handful of years ago, pre-COVID and everything. I mean, I don't remember if I saw it on Facebook or a website, or maybe they have a location. Their location in Milwaukee is really close to the Harley Davidson Museum.
Okay.
And I think there's a distillery right there, pretty close too. So like we drove by it.
Oh, okay.
And maybe I Googled it or something. I have no idea. Or saw it in one of my travels to Milwaukee. But yeah, I just always thought it was really unique, like a very cool, way of feeling like you can be part of this process, and it's pretty cool. So, anyways, Mobcraft.
That is pretty cool.
Yeah,
thanks for sharing that. So let's move on to a rather serious topic.
Yes.
Sometimes we talk about fun things like vacation plans and Halloween, and sometimes we talk about serious stuff like consequences. And here we are talking about consequences.
We are.
And I like to think that there is literally always a perfect time to talk about consequences, because there is always something that I have done or someone I care about has done that has yielded negative results.
Yeah, there's consequences to every action, pretty much. So,
yeah. Good or bad. True. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, have I had success? Yeah, totally. But, there's definitely failure in there.
Yeah.
So, I'm going to start by kind of talking about myself. I don't remember as a child having a lot of memories that were serious consequences for actions. I mean, Did I make mistakes? Yeah. Or did I ride around the block when I didn't have permission to do that? But nothing per se bad happened other than I felt guilty about doing it.
Yeah.
Which is a consequence. Guilt.
True. Yes.
But for the most part, I don't remember a lot of occasions when I was young where I kind of got hit with that consequence hammer.
I feel like we've talked a handful of times so that we were both pretty good kids.
Yeah, I think I don't want to say that I had like a good head on my shoulders. I think I just had a healthy appreciation for making good choices.
Yeah, that's fair.
Whether I always did or didn't, I knew that it was the right move.
Yeah.
And so most of the time I think I just did.
Yeah. Yeah.
I, as an adult, have a couple of occasions that have come up repeatedly where I kind of hit consequences. One of them is when I was in law school. This is a very specific example, but once when I was in law school, I started getting excluded by some of my friends when they would make plans outside of class.
Sure.
And I confronted one of them once, and he was just like, well, we always invite you and you never come. And I was really upset. And I stopped talking to him, and we didn't really ever talk again. We ultimately reconnected on social media eventually.
Sure.
And I feel perfectly good about him as a person now. But at the time, I was kind of like, how dare you decide that I shall not hang out with you? And then I realized eventually, at some point, that, if you invite someone over and over and over again and they never come, you're just going to give up because you're going to assume they don't want to hang out.
Yeah, I mean,
and why should you fight them?
That's...
Right? You've done it, right? Have you done that before? I've probably done that before where I've made efforts. I know I have. I've made efforts with people. We talked about that with friendship and many other times. And, you can only make so much effort with a person before you start to think, am I chasing them? Do they want to be around me?
Do you want to actually be in my world, my life?
Maybe I should let you go. And I think that it was possible at the time. When I was in law school, my husband and I were dating, but we didn't live near each other. So a lot of times on weekends, he would visit.
Right, but not always.
No, but on the weekends where he did visit, we never really did anything else. He would come over and we would maybe go out for a dinner or something, but we didn't really go out a lot. It was just time for us to spend time together.
Another group, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
And so, on those occasions, I did not go out and socialize with my law school friends, and I think it made an impact on some of them.
Yeah, I think that... at different times of your life or my life or people in general, you're not as self-aware of some of those things until you kind of look back and think, okay, that was the consequence to an action or a statement or something. But when you are in that moment, you don't really realize that necessarily until after.
Absolutely. It took me a very long time to realize that it wasn't totally irrational for my friend to respond this way.
Yeah, yeah.
A very long time. And I kind of feel bad about it now because he was a perfectly nice person. And I kind of just waved him off at that point.
Sure, yeah. And you could have... Sometimes, the consequence of this whole thing, later you may feel guilty for not reacting differently when you had that conversation or were presented with that reasoning. In
this particular case, he was very forthcoming and polite about it. He wasn't like, I don't want to hang out with you anymore because you're just going to ignore me. He wasn't argumentative or rude. He was just like, well, I just feel like most of the time we invite you out, you don't come.
Yeah. That's fair.
And I was just like, oh.
And then you just never hung out.
He was kind of right, and I feel bad about that.
Yeah.
And it cost me a friend then.
Yeah.
Because, for a variety of reasons. One, because I didn't try to repair that.
Right.
And two, because he was right.
Yeah.
I was excluding myself a lot. So it was for me, that was a good example of my consequences, kind of catching up to me. In general, I feel like I tend to commit to too much and then end up overwhelmed or disappointing someone. But we talked about double booking ourselves, which is a very mild example of that, where you like, oh yeah, I'm going to be there for that, and then you realize you already have something, and then you ultimately have to tell somebody you're not going to be there, right?
Yeah, we've all done that for
sure.
Yeah.
But I think that for me, I think that I run into a situation where I'm trying to do everything perfectly, or I'm trying to satisfy everyone. I'm trying to make everyone happy. I'm worried too much about that.
Yep.
And as a result, when I run into a situation where someone's like, hey, can you do this thing? And logistically, it would be an absolute nightmare for me to do that thing.
Yes.
I have a hard time just being like, that's not going to work out for me. Because I would rather, like, potentially screw it up
than
say no on occasion.
Sure.
I think I am better about that. I think there are a lot of times now where when someone is like, hey, can you do this thing? I will be like, I got to think about it. And I will give myself a moment or several
to decide
to realize whether or not I'm capable of what they're asking.
Yeah, no, I think that for a good period of time, I was very bad about saying yes to everything. And the consequences of that were a handful of things, but I think that for our family, it was negative, especially once we had kids, because they can't keep up with that pace.
Yes.
And my oldest would melt down because he can't do that many things in a period of time. It's just not possible.
Right.
And I think that doing that a number of times and living through the negative consequences of that, I learned, and that's really also a big thing about consequences, is it's a very great opportunity to learn from the things that you did that caused those consequences.
Yes, when you can finally nail down how you got here, is a pretty adult lesson to learn.
And I'm just getting there. Like, it took me 40 years, and I'm getting better at it, but definitely I am getting better at it. But there was a period of time that we definitely, and even my husband was like, there's too much. And I agree. And I took that personally at first because I was like, well, I want to be able to do all these things.
But I want to do that. But
Correct.
I want to do all of that.
And even if I want to do something, Jeff Goldblum, doesn't mean that I should. Just because you can, and can is relative, doesn't mean that you should. And I think that goes for a lot of different things. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. And there are negative consequences even when you don't think that there will be.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think occasionally that's where the lesson part comes in. Because I think sometimes when you commit whatever it is that you've committed that's going to end up with this negative consequence, that you're not at that moment realizing the potential negative consequence.
That is
and
true.
So you're sort of like, I'm going to go off and I'm going to
do
whatever this thing is. And, I'll give an example. I tend to hang out with a friend of mine on Friday evenings. And most of the time it's very low key. She'll come over, we'll have a couple beers, we'll hang out. Most of the time, not always, but a lot of the time it gets very late. And when my son was playing soccer, Saturday mornings would roll around, and I would have gone to bed very late and woken up pretty early.
And have to, adult.
And have to, get somebody else out the house and on a soccer field and then sit in what was usually either too cold or too hot weather and watch an hour of soccer.
Yeah.
While possibly hungover, but definitely overtired.
Exhausted. Yes.
And that was a very simple, classic consequence with a problem that, where the night before when I was hanging out with my friend and we were having a couple of drinks and it was getting to be 1 a.m, in my head I was just like, I feel fine right now.
Right. Not thinking about what you'll feel like in a handful of hours.
Yeah. A very small handful of hours.
I am still really bad at that. Staying up late and not being like, oh, I should go to bed. Well, I'll think to myself, oh, I should go to bed. But I don't listen to that internal monologue that I should. And then I pay for it the next day. And that will probably always continue to happen periodically. Not every day. But I definitely always make that mistake. And I
Yeah.
guess that's a consequence I'm willing to accept periodically.
Yeah. I have trouble sleeping. It's no secret.
sure.
And I try a variety of things to help me sleep. And one of the things that works the best is not going to bed too early.
Oh,
If
yeah.
I get into bed too early,
Oh,
I
yeah.
will be up forever before
Yeah.
I fall asleep. Much longer than I would be if I stayed up a little bit later.
I
So
can totally see that.
yeah.
Yeah.
It used to be one of my biggest problems when I started in the working world, when I stopped going to law school and I was kind of consistently on the same schedule. There would come a time in the evenings where I would say to myself, "Oh, I should go to bed.
Sure.
It's 10:30. I'm supposed to go to sleep now." And my body was not ready to go to sleep.
Yeah.
And especially on days where you don't like physically do a whole lot. I mean, if your job isn't super physically
Right.
demanding,
You're not
you
physically
might not
tired
be tired
enough.
yet. Your body's just not there yet. And
No,
so
I
you
get it.
lay down and you just lay there. And it was one of my biggest problems for the longest time. And I ended up going to a sleep specialist. And it was the first thing he had me do before I even came in for the appointment was to keep a log of my sleep.
Okay.
And he was like, I want you to write down what time you get into bed and approximately what time you fall asleep. And he's like, obviously,
Sure,
you
you
don't
don't know
always
exactly,
know,
but yeah.
but you know what time it was the last time you
You
looked at the clock.
Yeah.
Or you have an idea of how long you maybe laid there before you fell asleep.
Sure.
So you're going to write down what time you got into bed and what time you fell asleep and what time you woke up and what time you got out of bed. Because,
Okay.
what if you laid there for a while, whatever.
Yeah.
And so I did that for 2 weeks before even having my appointment. And he looks it over. I spent 10 minutes with this guy. And he goes, I know your problem and I can fix it. And he is like, you're getting into bed too early and you're not, and you're just laying there. You need to go to bed later.
Huh.
And I started going to bed later. And for a very, very long time, it was all I needed to do to get better sleep. And I still do that.
Sure.
Especially when I've had occasions where I haven't slept well because I can't shut my brain off, which is my main
that's
issue
the
now.
issue now. Yeah.
Because I'm an adult now, and back then I was still kind of not an adult.
Yeah, there wasn't as many responsibilities on your mind at that time. Yes.
But even now as an adult, where I feel like my brain is in overload all the time,
Yeah.
if I do force myself to stay up kind of late, I will write myself a lot of times that way.
okay.
So there are times where I'll be up and it'll be very late and I have to work the next morning, and I may have a long day. The next day might be long and I might be tired, but I'll kind of correct myself by doing that rather than trying to just lay down every single time I even get a little bit sleepy.
Right, and then you're up. It's an interesting unintended consequence of trying to do something that you think is the right thing, but in reality, for you, is actually the wrong thing.
I know. It's a very turned around example, but it is definitely something that
It is
I had to
interesting,
be
though.
aware of
Yeah.
what I was doing to kind of figure out what the consequence was going
Well, and
to
there's
be.
all kinds of unintended consequences in life too that you
Oh,
don't
sure,
realize
yeah.
until that point where you're getting the consequences, and you're like, oh, I didn't realize that was a possibility.
Yes. Well, and as a person who tends to put her foot in her mouth, I get a lot of that. I occasionally will say something that in my brain did not sound rude at all.
Oh yeah, I've totally done that.
And then it comes out as not very nice. And I've given this example, I think, even on the podcast when we were in high school. We were trying out for the softball team, and our friend Jamie did not make the team, and we did make the team. And I remember being with her. The three of us were all together after finding out, and she was very upset.
Sure.
Reasonably so. And you were comforting her like a normal human being and a friend. And I was just like, there, sorry. And she was very upset about how I handled that situation. And for me, it was a huge learning experience. And I think about it all the time, even now. I bet you, I won't say she doesn't remember that, because she probably does remember not making the softball team. I would think you would remember.
Sure.
But I wonder sometimes, I should just ask her.
If she remembers that.
But I wonder
that
sometimes if she
reaction.
remembers that incident being kind of a divisive element in our friendship, because we didn't really stay friends after that.
Huh. Yeah, interesting.
And I think about that moment and what I learned from how I treat my friends, and how what it usually means is when I start to become friends with somebody, I eventually lay it out on the table for them that I'm not good in emotional situations, and that if something bad happens to you,
you are not the first person
about you,
to go
but
for
I
comfort.
don't say it well. And I hope
fair.
you will forgive me when those moments happen, because they do.
That's reasonable. I've definitely put my foot in my mouth, though, not necessarily in the not knowing how to have empathy, but in the things come out not how they how
the
my
filter
brain
doesn't click on right away.
Doesn't work, or in that thing I'd be like, oh well, at least you don't have to go to practice tomorrow, or something dumb that. Like that would be what I would say.
Sure, right.
And it'd be some combination of sarcasm and something else that I've realized over time that I am very, very sarcastic, and not everyone really gets
they don't get that.
Or they aren't, so that's not they just don't respond well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It is tricky. Sarcasm is definitely one of those things that can yield some negative consequences.
And that's my normal mode of communication.
Yeah.
Throughout just life.
Yeah, no.
So,
I find myself being sarcastic a lot.
Yeah.
And I get exactly what you're saying, because most of my foot in mouth situations
like that,
are
for me,
sarcasm.
For sure.
Where I would say something where I'm just like, didn't you know? And they're just like, whoa.
Yeah, and they look appalled at you. Yeah, and I'm like, I was kidding, joke.
Yeah, it was a joke. I was
click.
joking.
Yeah, my daughter is really good, or was for a period, not as much anymore. And she looks at me and she goes, "That's sarcasm." And I'm like,
I love it.
Yes, it is.
Like,
She likes
very good.
For a period, she would point it out every day, and I was like, "Aren't you tired of pointing out every time that I'm sarcastic?" Because
on a totally different note, my son, for just a couple of weeks, there were a couple of occasions where we would have family gatherings. Either we went to, I think it was somebody's birthday once, and then we went out to dinner another time a few days later, and it was 2 or 3 times in a row within a week or so.
Sure.
And for some crazy reason, he thought it was a good idea to point out that I was drinking alcohol at these occasions. And so someone would pour me a glass of wine, and we would be at my brother's house.
Yeah.
And he would go, "You're drinking again?" And I would just look at him like, dude, what you are saying makes it sound like I already drank
I have a
today.
problem.
Yes.
Yeah.
Why are you doing that? And at one point, eventually, because I had the glass of wine or whatever, and then my sister-in-law opened another bottle of wine,
yeah.
and he came in and made another little
Again.
snarky comment, and I was like, "Can I speak with you in the other room?" And I took him aside and I went, "Stop pointing out that I'm drinking. I am not drinking too much. I have not had a drink today yet. This is a get-together. I had 1 glass of wine. I am drinking a second glass of wine. We are going to be here for 3 more hours. We haven't had dinner yet. I'm going to be fine."
Yes.
You got to dial it back on the sarcasm, man.
Yeah. That's an unintended consequence of me being sarcastic, is having sarcastic children. Very much so, because
my oldest is very sarcastic.
They learn from us very much.
Yeah. So now I want to talk a little bit more about my kids and their consequences.
Yeah.
My one son has kind of had a lot of this, and it's all the same underlying theme.
Okay.
He kind of doesn't really prioritize being on time to things. And every once in a while, I kind of wish he would show up at whatever activity he was going to, whether it was school or karate or
whatever it is, yeah.
sports or practice or whatever the thing is, and the person would kick him out because he's late. When I was in law school, if you were late to class,
you weren't even welcome.
You got kicked out. If you were not prepared, you got kicked out. And judging by how expensive law school classes were, you did not want to get kicked out.
Yeah.
You paid a lot of money for that class. If you did the math and broke down the individual class cost, it was way too much to get kicked out.
Right. Yeah, I get it. I feel like nowadays, though, I've seen this as a problem with my children, with my friends' children, that there aren't as many consequences for our kids, whether that be in school or in sports or extracurriculars or any of that, as I feel like there were when we were kids.
Right?
Like, I feel like in activities, again, even when we played like softball or things, like, they were hard on us.
Yeah.
Like, we were running laps. We were doing things like...
I got yelled at.
Yeah, like, on a regular basis. I will say my son's lacrosse coach yells a lot.
I think you've mentioned that before.
Which, his son is also on the team, so he yells a lot at his son. But he also yells at the other kids, which I'm totally fine with. But... like, there's been a handful of times. My daughter has a child in her class this year who was in my son's class last year. Every day they come home and are like, so-and-so, I'm going to call him Johnny. That's not his name at all. Got sent to the office again. Oh, he got a red card again. Oh, he's distracting. Oh, I can't focus. Oh,
yeah.
To the extent that I wrote an email to the teacher because... they had their desks moved and my daughter was placed next to him again.
Oh.
And she was so excited that she was going to be moved away from him. And she's like, I can't focus. He's always distracting or in my face or whatever. And she's like, he gets sent to the office all the time. And I'm like, okay, if a kid gets sent to the office once a week, twice a week, like, there needs to be something else that happens.
An intervention of some kind.
And we're in October. It's been months. Like, if you get sent to the office once a week, for that long, like, there's clearly not enough consequences to make him not do what he's doing.
Yes.
So...
that's a very good example. But like I said, I do kind of wish, and I'm sure that if I asked the karate teacher to give him a little tough love, that he would do it. Yeah. Like, I could approach him one week and be like, listen, next week, if we walk in and he's later than 30 seconds, I want you to kick him out. You have my permission to kick him out.
I would be fine
Tell him
with
to go home. And I will take him home and there will be no issue. I will not.
Yeah, I'm not going to yell at you. I'm not complaining. Yes.
I will just be like, you heard him. Let's go.
Yeah.
I guess you don't want to do this activity anymore.
Right. If you can't get here on time, and again, with... probably at that age, they don't know if it's the parents or the kid. Right. Potentially. But if it's the kid, they need to have some sort of... honestly, at that point, I would probably, if I were the teacher, I would say that anyways, because the parents need to be accountable as well.
Absolutely,
if the kid can't drive themselves.
You're right. But, and I feel that way. Yeah. And like... but I also, because my son is reaching that point where we're trying to have him pick up the reins on more responsibility.
He's at the age that he should be, honestly.
Yeah, that there are times where I give him a little bit more tough love on things. He gets up, we had dinner this evening, and he gets up and he comes over and he stands right in my face at the dinner table to talk to me, and I honestly don't remember what he said to me. And I was like, get back in your seat. Get away from my face.
Give me some space.
And that's literally what I said. I said, get away from me. And my mother is sitting across from me, and she's like horrified that I just said that. And I'm like, yeah, well, you didn't hear what he shouted in my face right before before I said it. Yeah. And he wasn't offended by me telling him to go sit back down. Yeah. But I feel like there are opportunities to hold him more responsible. Yeah. And I want to take those opportunities. And even my little one has a lot of that. He's a very emotional kid. Yeah. And I feel like we still do kind of like basically timeouts with him as a result. Okay. Because when he gets out of hand, when he starts yelling, we will separate him from the situation and put him away.
Yeah, he needs to calm down at that point. Yeah.
And so for him, we still sort of do stuff like that Whereas with my older son, a lot of it has to do with like kind of keeping track of your responsibilities and keeping that sort of thing together in a reasonable
self-regulation is really like at the age he's at, he needs to start learning that.
At least start.
Yeah.
And our teacher sent out an email and just said, hey, by the way, with the first quarter book report is due on XYZ date.
Sure.
And this was a few weeks early. And I go, a few weeks before the date. And so I asked my son, what book are you reading for the book report? How far along are you? Are you almost done with it? Have you been working? It's like a little packet.
Okay.
It's got vocabulary and it's got other stuff.
Yeah.
And it's pretty structured. It's not like just a free-form write-up of what the book is about.
He knows what he needs to do.
Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. And I'm like, how's it coming along? And he's like, I'm pretty far in the book and I've started working on the book report.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay, that sounds good.
Yeah.
And then the week of, I'm like, how much of the book do you have left? I'm sorry, it might have been 2 days before. It might have been really early, like right before.
Okay.
He's not even close to done with the book.
Oh, jeez.
And I'm just like, how do you expect to finish this book and finish this book report in 2 days? You're not going to be able to do it. And he's like, well, I'll read most of it. Well, is most of it going to get you an A on this book report? And he's like, yeah, I'm sure it'll be fine.
That's not how it works.
And it isn't how it works. I'm not going to say what grade he got. It wasn't that bad, but it wasn't an A.
Yeah.
And I was like, at one point, he said something because one time last year we were trying really, really hard to get him to be a little bit more motivated.
Yeah.
And I told him if he got 100% on his math test, 100, not 98, not 93, 100, I would give him $100.
Oh?
100%, you get $100.
Okay.
Anything less, you get nothing.
Yeah.
And every test after this test, if you get less than 100, you owe me the dollar amount difference.
Oh, I like it.
So if you get a 93 on the next test, you owe me $7. You better have my money.
Huh. All right.
And it worked really well. It worked really well for him. He did very well.
Okay.
And
Hey,
I
whatever
think I
works.
only in the rest of the school year, I think I only got like $4 or $5 back from him. He did really well.
All right.
And so he got this book report, and he also got a test from another class, and he had gotten a 95 on the test. And he goes, I got a 95. Can I have $95? And I was like, no, the 100 is for 100.
Yeah, that's not how this works.
There's no $95 agreement.
No.
There's a $100 agreement. I will give you $100 for every test you get 100 on from your different classes, and then we can start from there. But until that happens, you will not get any money from me.
Yeah.
And, we don't have any hundreds yet, so I haven't had to give him any money yet. And we're a couple months in. We'll see. He might turn it around. But that was a positive consequence that worked out for him last year, and that I would be happy to duplicate.
Okay.
I often think about that with driving, how I worry about my kids learning how to drive and, like, what am I going to do to keep them from, like, killing somebody in a car?
Yeah, that's terrifying.
And I often think, maybe what I would do is offer to give them some crazy sum of money when they turn 18 if they avoid being stopped by the police for any reason between 16 and 18. Like, you don't get pulled over, you don't get arrested, you don't do anything like that.
No tickets, no moving violations.
You $2,000 to take with you to college. Free money right off the bat.
I mean,
all you got to do is
financially motivated. It's a possibility.
Yeah.
Huh. I don't know. I'll think about that.
And maybe there's another concept. Maybe there's another motivation that works better than giving them a little pile of cash.
I mean, that is pretty motivating for most people.
I mean,
so
for if you were like, hey, if you could not get pulled over for 2 years,
dude,
I'll give you $2,000. I would never get pulled over again.
Ever. Yeah.
I would take the $2,000 every year.
Yeah, totally. I'm totally in for that one. I was just thinking as we were talking about kids and school stuff. So my son, like 2 weeks ago, he comes home and he's like, oh, I'm going to run for class president. And I was like, okay, cool. If you need us to do anything, let us know. And he's like, no, I got it. And like the next day, he's like, oh, I didn't win. And I was like, okay, whoa. Like,
what?
Were you supposed to write a speech? And he's like, yeah, the girl who won, like she had signs and she wrote a speech. And I was like,
oh my goodness.
So you did nothing. Which is why you didn't win. He's like, well, I was like third in votes. And I was like, third is nothing.
Yeah,
like
that's-
you're not even the vice president of the class. Like, I'm like, but you did nothing to get it. And if
Yeah.
you would have put forth some effort, maybe you would have won. Maybe you wouldn't have. But at least you would have known that you put in the effort to
Yes.
try. If you don't even do that, then you never know.
Well, and that's what I said to my son about the book report. I was like, the grade that you got on the book report, if you had read the entire book and gotten this grade, I would be pleased. It
Yeah.
would be fine.
Because you did the work.
Yes,
Yeah.
but you didn't even finish the book. So
Right.
there was no chance that you were going to get 100%
Right,
on this book
because
report.
you-
There was no way that
You
was going to
didn't
happen.
do all the work.
Because you missed a crucial element. A fixable problem existed.
Yes. Yes.
And he was just like, yeah, I guess so. And I was like, bring home the next book for the next book report and get it done.
Yeah.
Finish reading it.
I've talked to both of my kids of late in terms of that. Like, if you don't prepare, then there's likely a negative consequence that's going to
Yes.
happen. And if there's not, it's because you got lucky. It's
Right.
going to catch up with you eventually.
Yep.
Life is not like that. Like, I say this a lot to my kids, not that particular, but I'm like, that's not how life works.
Yep.
Eventually your luck is going to run out and something negative is going to happen because you did not do what you were supposed to do. And for a while, maybe that works out okay.
Right.
Like, we skated through something as in our childhood, in our lives. Everybody does it at some point, but at some point it catches up with you.
Yes.
At some point, something you either
Always.
did or something you didn't do catches up with you. It always does. If you
Always.
think that, oh, I got away with that, you're just waiting for when it's actually
Yeah,
going
you're probably
to
just
happen.
not done with it yet.
It's gonna come back. Like, it always comes back. Karma is there. It's going to come back and get you. Whether it's tomorrow or next year, you're gonna have a consequence to whatever you did or
Yeah.
didn't do that you should have. So I've been trying to instill this in my children, and I'm sure that it won't really solidify until something negative does occur from, like, my kid didn't really care about the class president thing, so that to him wasn't important. But
Sure,
once there's
sure.
something that is important that they miss or they miss out on or they don't get, then hopefully it does solidify. Hopefully it's not that bad.
Right.
But I feel like a lot of lessons come from, like we said earlier, those negative consequences at some point. And you
Yes.
just hope that they're not as significant as some might be.
Right.
So, all right, well, I'm going to open this. We
Let's-
can continue, but
Let's drink our second beer.
Okay, so
and suffer
this
those consequences.
is One Love Bunt Cake, Belgian style quad, brewed with honey, then aged in rum barrels, fermented with raisins, cherries, and vanilla. This is a lot of stuff going on here.
Yeah, that's a lot for my brain to process.
This
I don't even know
is-
what this
yeah,
is
we're
gonna
just
taste
gonna
like.
taste it. This is one of the crowdsourced ones. So Mitch Bruckert from Waukesha, Wisconsin, submitted this idea. So this is not something that likely will be around forever,
Okay.
unless it does very well, and who knows. But this is one of the crowdsourced series that won the votes. So I haven't had a quad in a while,
Yeah, me neither.
right? That's a lot of flavor. Just a lot. It's a lot in my mouth. I
Okay.
taste the cherry.
Yes, I get
It's
cherry.
very tart. I think I taste some honey.
Yeah, maybe honey. Okay, rum barrels. Okay, I get that. Maybe
I get the
rum.
rum. I, of course, don't get vanilla because we know with me.
Yeah, what's vanilla?
But definitely the cherry is kind of
Maybe
overwhelming
raisin.
to me.
Maybe
Yeah,
raisin
maybe.
and the tail end there. I'm getting a little bit of that like earthy sweetness.
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, if you asked me what was in this beer
I would
without
have
telling me,
no idea.
I maybe would say cherries.
Cherry because of the tartness. I
Yeah.
think I would say cherry. But all the rest of it is just a lot.
There's so many things, and you know what? It's cool, and I actually
It's unique.
together
It's
I
not a
enjoy
bad
the flavor.
taste.
But I poured it into a pint glass, and I poured myself about 2.5 inches.
Yeah.
This is plenty.
Agreed. I think this is a little overwhelming for my taste buds right now.
Yeah,
to
I
be
agree.
honest.
And I mean, we didn't slam 10 of these
yeah.
hippopotamus.
Hippopotamus, I like that.
Hippopotamus.
Apocalypse. 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 Oh, geez. Apocalypse. Okay. We didn't even split a whole can of that.
No.
So we're not.
I feel like we're not being very convincing, but rest assured.
Yeah, and they're 12 ounces, guys. They're not even 16.
Yeah, we didn't
These
drink
are little
12
cans.
beers and then drink
I think
this
all
beer.
their cans are 12 ounces, too.
Oh, okay.
Well, what I've seen in distro, at least. I don't know
Okay.
about there. But this one, just the cherry tartness, I'm definitely getting totally. The rum, I actually think I'm getting a little bit of that.
Yeah,
but
I think I maybe get a little bit of rum.
I don't think I would have picked it out if you wouldn't have told me.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of that is because it's been a while since we've had a quad. So there's a part of you that probably doesn't remember all of the elements of a quad.
That's
and for
fair.
me, what I do remember from quads is that it's more of a sweeter, heavier bodied
Which it is.
beer. Rather than like when you drink some stouts and porters and things like that, obviously they do have sweetness to them at times, but most of the time they're more on the milky or creamy or heavier, body side of things than necessarily being sweet by themselves. I don't think most stouts really are very sweet by themselves.
Most of them are the
unless they
adjuncts.
adjunct.
Like the adjunct is what makes a stout sweet
Yeah.
to me most of the time. This, you're right. This, I actually kind of like the sweetness to it. I feel like the cherry tartness cuts some of the sweetness. So it's not overwhelmingly sweet, but I do feel like it is a flavor bomb. Like, lots of stuff going on.
Might have some heartburn later from this one. Be careful.
That's fair. It's a very interesting beer.
Yes. I mean, am I glad that I tried it? I totally am.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't need to drink a lot of this beer.
No.
This would be a good thing to bring to like a share with like 5 or 6 people and give everyone like a shot worth.
Yeah.
That would be cool. You could do that.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I'm picking out some of the things. I do feel like it's a lot of flavor to me.
Yes.
And you're right. I haven't had a quad in a bit.
Yeah.
So.
Well, not a lot of breweries make quads.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting. I mean, I'm glad we tried it.
Me too. And glad we had some Mobcraft. That was such a fun origin story.
I think it's a very unique, cool brewery concept.
I agree. Really awesome.
Cool. I like it. All right.
See you guys next time.
Bye.
Thanks everyone for listening to the latest musings from Parenting by the Pint.
Be sure to find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to us wherever you find your podcasts.
Have a great week and cheers to you all.